Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duval, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man whose magics have detected the evil, if not the source.
Tim Longo. Oh, I know who the evil is.
Oh, I know you know. We had a whole discussion about this in advance. Because I saw the name in there. I was like, oh, that's a weird coincidence. We'll get to that, I suppose. We are starting a new series on 1991's Eye of the Beholder, which is... I don't remember it being a gold box game. You didn't really remember it being a gold box game.
I have the box behind me on the shelf.
No gold, right?
Well, I guess sort of. I guess so. I mean, I just feel like they branded it that way. But I mean, it is, the Forgotten Realms boxes all have the same sort of art, and
they did.
Even the cover artists.
But this is just different from the gold box presentation of the games, which were tactical RPGs, right? Top down.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a scene in the opening cutscene where I was like, "That's a gold box game,"
mm-hmm. Right?
Where the four heroes are walking into the castle, and like they have 2 frames of animation. It's like arm swinging left, arm swinging right, and it's top down. And all you see is this blade moving in front. You're like, this guy's waving his blade around with all these guards. It's a very comical moment.
That's a good point, though, because I didn't even think about that. But that intro cinematic is a bit of an homage. I mean, it's a little bit like Ultima Underworld was, where it's like, and now you're going into the dungeon,
Right, yeah.
It's like, here's what it used to look like, and now you're going first person.
So. Yeah. So same sort of thing here. It was pretty funny because it was also like lots of little sword into sheath, dagger into smaller sheath, I guess. I forget, like a mage praying and or mage rather picking up their spell book and a cleric. I was very entertained. I was very entertained the whole time. But yes, anyway, we'll discuss this a little bit. Let's first set it in its time and talk a little bit about its developer and publisher. It's funny. I wouldn't have thought this would be the first Westwood game we play because I totally forgot Westwood was involved.
Yeah, me too.
In any way. I think of Westwood as starting with Dune 2, but of course they didn't. This is before Dune 2. But Dune 2 is the first Westwood game I think of, because so many other of the games they worked on I associate with their publishers. And they're basically work for hire, I think, in many cases, or in a traditional developer publisher relationship. But anyway, some games from 1991, just to sort of set us where we were. A couple that we've played are A Link to the Past and Super Castlevania 4, both, of course, on the SNES. And we also have played games that are sort of related in series and things like that. Mega Man 4, Final Fantasy 4, and Metroid 2, Return of Samus, which, of course, go ahead.
I'm playing it now.
Now, what version? You're playing a Game Boy version, right?
Yeah, no, I'm playing the Game Boy. Yeah, the one in
the emulated
Nintendo
Game Boy
Online. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's it's in the monochrome. Yeah, it's very fascinating to play. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see.
Having played whatever it's called, the remake is what? Zero Mission? Is that correct?
No, Zero Mission is a remake of the first game, which I played already.
Okay.
And the one on the 3DS that's just called Samus Returns.
Okay.
Is a remake of 2. Yeah, which is the developers that made Dread. Their second one was Dread.
Right.
With the newest one, for the Switch. Yeah. So I don't remember. I don't know. I feel like Samus Returns is barely a remake because as I'm playing this, but anyway, it's just interesting to play them in order. I mean, the Spider Ball is in this one, not to digress into Metroid again, but I'm just amazed at, even in the Game Boy version, how much they got into this thing. So maybe we'll do a bonusy type breakdown of my Metroid adventures eventually. I think I might even replay Super Metroid in this journey.
Wow.
Just because it's there, but I'm enjoying it. But man, Metroid on Game Boy, weird, super weird, but
Yeah,
interesting.
so limited with the
Mm-hmm.
buttons. Yeah.
But they figured it out. They did a lot. It's really
Wow,
impressive.
that's cool. That's cool. Well, maybe I'll play it. Note, he never played it.
No.
Sonic the Hedgehog and Battletoads were another couple I picked out. Just Sonic because it's such a iconic game. I do remember playing that a bit back at the time on the Genesis, or I guess the Master System or something. I don't remember what it's called in other territories. Master Drive is a Master Drive, the Genesis anyway here in the States. And then Battletoads was a Rare title, an early Rare title with the Stamper Brothers doing the design. There's also this year Civilization on the PC. We played Civ 2 or Civ 3. Civ 3. I think we played Civ. I think we played Civ 3.
Yeah, I think it was 3.
Another World is a great game from this era with its sort of rotoscoped polygonal graphics. Which is another game I've never finished. It's not a long game if you can play it straight through, but it's a difficult game, so it's a challenge one. Space Quest 4, of course, another sequel in that series. I don't know, you may have played that one back in the day. Monkey Island 2.
Oh, I definitely did.
Yeah, Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge, and Wing Commander 2, which I was surprised to see. I didn't realize... I guess I never really thought about how far back Wing Commander must have gone, because I the only one I played was the fourth one, which I think came out maybe the year before I joined LucasArts or thereabouts. And because we were making a space combat game, I was boning up on the other games, and that was the most recent one. I never played Wing Commander 2. And then this was an era of licenses, especially on the consoles. There were so many movie tie-ins. Like Hudson Hawk got a game this year. That's one of the ones that we saw there. There was a Terminator 2 game. I mean, just oodles of them.
American Gladiators.
There was
The Hunt for the Red October.
Hunt for Red October. Yeah, of course.
The Godfather, side-scrolling shooter classic, The Godfather.
Yeah, that's what you always think of when you think of The Godfather. Leave the gun, take the cannolis. Except in this game, it's the other way around. It's bizarre.
Imagine if you use the cannolis.
That's your health power up after you go into the bar. So anyway, that kind of gives you a sense of the landscape. I guess that's the 16-bit era going strong on the consoles, and on the PC. It was kind of a wide variety. I mean, this title in particular came out not only on MS-DOS, which is what we're playing, via GOG, and Steam. You're playing, I guess, on Steam, but it was also on the Amiga, and then later on the Sega CD and the SNES. So it kind of crossed over in a weird way. And then the PC 98, which is, I'm not even sure what that is. Oh, right, yes. PC 9800, yeah, okay, which is a Japanese PC, basically, which I'm not super familiar with, but have heard of, never seen one. So it's it's that type of era. There's a wide variety of machines you could be running on. Earlier games that they had worked on would have been on, Atari STs and Commodores and even still DOS, but those machines are still viable. The first games Westwood worked on would have been on things like the Apple II. I don't think they ever worked on VICs, because I don't think anybody really shipped for the VIC-20, but Commodore, and Ataris and Apple IIs were things that they started out on, even porting stuff to the Spectrum and things like that, the Amstrad in the UK. So they were no stranger to like putting their games on a bunch of different platforms and, trying to crunch them down and fit onto different architectures. But I definitely don't think of them as really the RPG house that they were. I mean, their very first title was a SSI title called Questron, which is a role-playing game that goes back to 1988. So they kind of jumped in and were doing this sort of thing, as well as some Disney stuff, things like that. Like I said, I really think of Westwood as being, beginning with Dune 2, but they also made Legend of Carandia, which I believe is fairly well regarded.
Oh yeah, I'm looking that one up now. I forgot about that game, but I see the cover and I'm like,
And they did a few of those. So there were a few of those games. Some tie-ins of their own. But then, of course, in 1995, they turned to Command and Conquer, and then did Red Alert the next year. And I think that and then Dune 2000 kind of started to set them apart a little bit. I mean, they always were making different sorts of things, but Command and Conquer, I think, really became their bread and butter until later they were bought by EA and maybe merged with somebody like I forget, they became something else, right? They merged with somebody and became something else later in their history. Remember, was
yeah, it was a bit
it
of
with
a
Pandemic or something? And
EA Los Angeles. I mean, it was a yeah. I mean, it was a weird kind of sad story, if you ask me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was kind of the story with whoever.
Earth and Beyond. Holy cow!
Yeah, they made Earth and Beyond. Yeah. Anyway, so Westwood, great studio. I met Lewis Castle once at GDC. I think we were maybe on a Game Developers Choice Awards panel or jury together, or maybe he was just another person on another panel. I don't remember what the connection was, and chatted with him quite a bit over that dinner before the event. But nice guy. So let's dive in, unless there's more you want to talk about with Westwood.
No, yeah, no. I mean, you mentioned Lewis Castle, Brett Sperry, yeah,
the other main person, yeah,
no, it's interesting. It is, yeah. I just completely blindsided me that they were the developer of this game. Yeah, I mean, for the gold box games in general,
I was surprised. Just was like, what?
SSI is I don't know. I guess this era wasn't particularly known for putting its developers as front facing as the publishers, but SSI was, because of the gold box games and because of they were doing I think some war games too, right?
Yeah. I mean, the SS is strategic simulations, and they did a lot of World War II sims. I mean, they had tons of games that they published. In fact, I think it's probably a little difficult to actually know, just looking at their Wikipedia stuff, which ones did they actually make, versus publish. And they have so many games that they're just in alphabetical order and not sort of by year or by whether they developed them or not. So you'd have to kind of dig into individual games to see what they had done. But I had thought of them as I thought of SSI as the developer of all these D&D games, and not somebody who contracted them out to people people like Westwood. So definitely unexpected for me. Looks like they did a lot of work with US Gold as well, which was another company way back then. One of those just random names, where you're like, what is US Gold? Just
I mean,
back when we didn't know what to name our games, our companies rather, back before they had more whimsical names. US Gold.
Well, and they acquired the AD&D license from TSR, and that's why.
And they had it for ages.
Pool of Radiance being one of the key games.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that up through Ruins of Myth Draenor, I think, were the sort of four that are considered. There's 3 or 4 that are considered I think of as the 4 gold box games. But I guess this is part of that. It's weird because as we said, it takes on a different sort of perspective. And so we can kind of dive, I guess, right into that. I mean, it's a first person game, which has a real lineage in, computer RPGs, which is funny because, we play every week. We're still playing top down, we're playing as if we're playing with minis. We play digitally, online, and it's that top down perspective. And what's funny is that because we play top down, we just have the map's just there, which is not a thing when you play in first person, unless an automap, which was not a feature that came along for a little while yet. So you're stuck there. I remember doing this for Ultimate games. I feel like I played a bit of Wizardry, maybe 4, way back on the Apple II. Might have even been Wizardry 1 now that I think about it, where, same thing. It was drawing out maps. Bard's Tale.
Bard's Tale was mine, yeah, before this.
Yeah. And of course we played, and I'm pretty sure Ultima Underworld was auto mapping, as I recall.
Yeah.
And you could mark on the map, right? You could put markers anywhere. So here you're doing that, but on a separate piece of paper, or in my case, Procreate. So because I had to, as I was mapping, to move it all around. But how does it change for you, the feel of playing this sort of D&D RPG style game when it switches to that perspective?
Well, we talked about it with, I'm sure this general topic came up when we played Ultima Underworld, because that's when we started talking about first person RPGs and the progression there. And playing, I think Ultima 3 was like the only Ultima game back then that I maybe finished. I didn't play Wizardry. I know I played the Gold Box games to some degree, but I bet I didn't fully, because they're so crunchy. You know what I mean? And kind of fairly punishing in their, as they held on to the discrete rules of the game and translated it to RPGs. But the reason I bring that up is for the reason this particular game, other than Bard's Tale, which I definitely didn't finish because that game was ridiculous as I recall. But this game, being a D&D nerd and a Forgotten Realms nerd, and loving the idea of the Gold Box games, being Pool of Radiance being the best example, when this came out, for me it was everything I wanted out of a D&D game. I wanted the dungeon crawl. I wanted the first person, as I've said many times, I'm a big fan of first person. And the game Dungeon Master, which I wanted to bring up, which came out in 87, I think it looks like 87. We figured out. Yeah. That was at the time, it hadn't been ported. I'm not even sure even if it did get ported it did get ported to DOS. Much later though. And so because I didn't have an Atari ST or an Amiga or an Apple, I had an older MS-DOS machine, an x86 machine. I was always jealous of people who could play Dungeon Master because I couldn't. It was the whole platform problem. And so I just couldn't. Of course, that was a lore that I didn't really care about. But then when Eye of the Beholder came out, this was like all of the Venn diagrams merged for me. And I was like, this is what I'm waiting for. And so that translation for me, even though you miss out on the overworld adventure part of it, just talking about the intro, talking about going below Waterdeep, being sort of fully immersed, of course, as we talked about with the Ultima Underworld series, which, you can go back and listen to, I guess, that was the more, the fuller expression of what I really wanted because it was not grid based. Just such a great translation. But this was really the first step for me because, Bard's Tale, I couldn't sink into that. And this one I was like, okay, this is where worlds collide. So I really loved the translation, and it was the case for many games back then. I remember the original at the time called Dragon Warrior, now called Dragon Quest, was a console version of a dungeon crawler that I remember playing. The reason I bring that up is when we started playing this, and I had to get out. I mean, I'm also using the iPad. But physically mapping out the dungeons, I just got giddy. I was just like, I love it all over again, even though it's cumbersome and you have to translate it and keep track of your direction and everything and make sure everything's, correct. I don't know. Eye of the Beholder for me, because it's in first person and also required mapping, it was this weird convergence of feeling like you're playing D&D because you're mapping, at least in the old days, you're using graph paper, you're mapping it out, right? Like you said, and the DM is describing to you what's happening. You're like, okay, I go one more square, whatever, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And now you're doing the combo of that plus with this at the time, audio, graphics, artwork, animation. I don't know. I was just in heaven when I got this game. And like I said before, literally on my shelf. Let me see. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games on that shelf. That's it. Over my whole life. And one of them is the boxed version of this game, my original box.
Wow. Well, it would be 11, but I have your Metal Gear Solid 3. So
yeah, that's that. I need that back, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
I think I have multiple versions of that.
The funny thing is that Dungeon Master is not, as far as I can tell, not available, right? And
for us to play.
For us to play. Yeah, that's the one too that I think of as like one of the ones that got away that I never got around to, but always knew about because I didn't
It's
buy.
pretty infamous.
Yeah, I didn't buy a lot of games, and I seem to remember, at one point hearing about Dungeon Master and how it took a long time to get it ported for whatever reason, rights or disagreeing with the publisher or even just doing other things. And
I remember that because they kept waiting and waiting.
Yeah, they basically missed their window. So by the time it came out, it was dated compared to things that were on the probably games like this, right? That were available, and they just missed their window. And back then, I mean, you could things could change really dramatically, in one generation of hardware. I mean, you were moving from Apples to IBM PCs, right? And that's a pretty big step, right? And you could really feel the difference in the games on the PC in a way that you could almost feel like with a console transition, right? I mean, you were also moving from this many bits to that many bits often as well, right? So 8 to 16, I think, in that that example. So you also had that same, you were having the same sorts of transitions, and of course there was additional storage capability, faster, a faster drive maybe or whatever, not cartridges, so you could have as many discs as you wanted. You might have to flip back and forth between them many times, which would be maybe tedious to us today, but it was sort of the way things kind of worked at the time. I mean, I guess that even went up until the PlayStation 1, swapping discs. And I mean, maybe there were even some PS2 giant JRPGs that did that. I can't recall. Hard to believe filling up a DVD, but I'm sure somebody did it. Anyway, I mean, it was just a time where you were, you had a different sort of experience, and they were definitely with Dungeon Master. They missed the boat with the PC. It just, for whatever reason, I don't remember. I'd have to go track down the details. It might have been the one, right? If not for that, because I do think on the Amiga it was considered very, very advanced, and so it was one of the ones I knew about, and I had kind of, at the point that was coming out, I was in high school, and not really playing as many games, but it even kind of filtered through to me that was one of the ones to play. And
and the first person and the real-time combat, which was something we'll talk about with this, or semi-real-time, because again, both of those things are just we talked about it with Doom and Wolfenstein and stuff too, right? It's like there was a bit of this when, like you mentioned, with,
or even just Diablo too, right?
Diablo. But I was the first person specifically I was going to mention because of wizardry, and then there were viewports in the predecessors that had some, first person sort of like angles,
vector graphics.
Yeah, vector graphics. So you could, so they were implying even Wasteland, right? We must have talked about it at the time. Didn't Wasteland have a port that was showing you?
I don't remember that.
Maybe not. I don't
remember that in Wasteland, but I mean, definitely Ultima
did, wizardry.
And you would go up in Ultima, one of the early Ultimas, you actually went, I think it was Ultima 1. There was like an overworld and the dungeons, and the dungeons were first person, but the overworld was not. The overworld
Yeah.
was the sort of what you think of as like Ultima 7, as a much prettier version of,
Yeah.
or 6, those sort of top down ones. 4, all kind of had that sort of viewport. But you would go down into the dungeon, and it was first person, but it was entirely turn based. There was none of the real time. The monsters, I mean, they would chase you, but they'd move just as fast as you. You got to turn, they got to turn, and you could run up ladders and things like that to get away if you had to. Whereas here, if you're running away, presumably they could be clawing away at your back. I love the sort of recharging of your attack. Like you do your attack, and then they might get an attack, and you're waiting like, oh, I want to get my attack in, and it's very simple. You're just right clicking on, the weapon button, but you are going between, so far I've only had to use my frontline characters, the two, I'm just using the pre-generated characters. So a fighter, I think, and a ranger. And they're just like, stabbing all the kobolds and whatever those things are, leeches, giant leeches or something, that are on that first floor of the dungeon. And that is itself compelling. Just I gotta wait, I gotta go. It's like an active time battle, right? It's like, I gotta be ready to do it.
That's literally what they, in this Dungeon Master article, they literally describe it as active time battle.
Yeah,
because of its real time nature, but pseudo real time nature. Yeah, and it looks like here, if I'm looking at the dates right, the DOS version of Dungeon. So the Atari ST was the first version. That was in '87. The DOS version didn't come out until '92. So 5 years. 5 years later. Yeah, that's eons for a port to come out.
Forever. Yeah.
And I didn't have an Amiga. The Amiga came out the next year, but in '88. But I didn't have either of those, and I wasn't going to get them. So just 40,000 copies. That's pretty good at the time. Still. Oh, and
not compared to this one, which is around 130.
Oh, was it? Okay, yeah. So, and the thing is, like, I was playing Forgotten Realms at the time, most likely. In fact, I'm pretty sure I was likely playing Temple of Elemental Evil or something like that. And so the property was a big deal for me. Quote unquote, living inside the dungeon, inside the depths of Waterdeep, no less, which is an infamous place. The characters involved, I just like, it was just so many good things. And then, the real time nature of it all. Yeah, it's just a magical time.
It is pretty neat to come up on a corner. Now the AI on the creatures is not particularly good. Like they won't actually, well, at least the kobolds, maybe later creatures will approach you faster, but I could like see them down the hallway and just like stop and be like, okay, I'm just going to hit the camp button here. Not to rest, but just to like, okay, let me draw on my map. And then return to game. Cause that's essentially your pause button, which is nice. I'm really happy for that, to be honest, cause it would be difficult to map it and all of that stuff. This tradition of this sort of game continues even today. I mean, there's I don't know how recently there's been an entry in this series, but there are plenty of them on the PC. That sort of have the same style. And then, like, isn't it Grimlock or something like that? I want to say that's in the last 10 years or so. And then I was thinking, especially on the DS, of a game called Etrian Odyssey. I think I played the third or the fourth game in that series. Not all of it. I played, several levels into the dungeon, and then, as we were talking about pre-show, I'm just not a mobile gamer, handheld gamer. So I, ended up putting it down at some point and never went back to it. But it had mapping on the DS where you would like tap the walls, and turn them on or off, and so you could just map the dungeon as you played, and you had the same sort of mind bending. Okay, wait a minute, I'm heading south and I'm making a left turn. Okay, so that's this direction, that a sort of fixed perspective has that you don't have on graph paper. You can just literally turn the graph paper around, but it's a little bit different when you're doing it on a handheld. I'm constantly turning around my map in Procreate so that I can it can be oriented in the same direction.
Yeah, there's a little extra. I have developed a skill, I guess, where I don't have to do that, but there's an extra mind melter on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to do it, Tim. Let's be clear.
But you can.
It's easy, so I just do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the real time combat is really surprising. I look forward to a future where I'm also doing the spells and things like that, and like trying to manage that. One of the things I noted in my notes was that it's I leveled up pretty soon after starting the dungeon. Like I think I killed maybe 4 kobolds and 3 whatever those things are, worms of some kind, and 2 of my characters leveled up. I was like, oh, cool, and I totally forgot to level them. So I have to go back and do that. Oh, and then the other thing, this was amazing. I don't know if this was true for you. When you start the game, I could not believe this was true, but when you start the game with the pre-rolled characters, the spellcasters have no spells.
Yeah, no, I had to do it too. Yeah, you have to pick them, and
first thing you do, you have to rest.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I mean, it's to the rules, I guess, or something.
Presumably they would have, rested the night before.
Before
they went to meet the Lord of Waterdeep.
Yeah.
They would have been prepared with their spell book and their prayer. I thought that was very funny. I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll just hide out by these rocks and hope that, that nothing attacks.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount of, I think just to speak to the real time nature of it, the time's ticking by. There was a certain new, because to your point about like Ultima and Pool of Radiance and all of those games being turn based, and D&D itself, especially when you're in combat or et cetera, is being turn based. There's a certain tension that comes with this game because unless you're pausing, people are like, you're going hungry. The AI isn't great, so it doesn't pursue you unless it really sees you, but you hear it, and I totally forgot about how much audio there is in this game and how much information you get from that audio. You start to learn what type of creature it is.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe even how far away it is.
Some worms. I heard them before I saw them. I was just like, oh, I'm coming up on some more of those worms, but they were behind a door, and I could see them through the grate, which is another thing at the bottom. The bottom of this.
Yeah.
You can see the worms there, which is really, really nice touch. And like I'm going to run into those eventually. I mean, this feels like, it's funny. It's definitely sort of an ethos of the time that. Of early Dungeons and Dragons, that you covered the whole map. Like you always covered the whole map, whereas, playing in a more modern campaign, in 2 cases, like as a player and as a DM, nobody covers the whole map anymore.
it's all goal based. It's not.
Yeah, it's not get to the big
XP based, right? Where you're like, oh, we want to get all the XP, so we got to do everything.
I think with computer games, it's still that to some degree, and that's of course partly our style as players. But when I'm playing D&D, I'm not remotely a completionist. I'll see areas and I'll go chasing after something else, and then, if the story's drawing you along, you just keep going. And it's really funny to, that's another thing I hadn't really considered, that this really ties back to my earlier days as a D&D player when. Since the stories were so thin, and many of the modules and things with that were nothing but there might be a story there, but you really have to squint to figure it out, and maybe find all the clues and, to uncover what that story might be. But you're not there for a narrative reason other than some plot hook, like, oh, there's ghosts, in the old house over Saltmarsh, and it's like, okay, well, I guess we'll go clear it out of ghosts, and and it's, there's a lot of great fun dungeons from that time, but they're narrative.
Tomb of Horrors.
Yeah, Tomb of Horrors, right? I mean, that's just like, giant nightmare.
It's just challenges. Yeah, it's just like, how do we kill the player? Kill the players. Yeah.
How do we outlast the DM, right? I mean, it's definitely and that was a tournament. That was another thing is the
Yeah,
tournament.
you've talked
right?
about
So
that before. Yeah.
there's a whole ethos of that as well of tournament play, high degree of difficulty, creativity and surviving longer to get more quote unquote points. I mean, I think they literally scored them in that way. I definitely played in those sorts of tournaments once or twice, and they were literally scoring you, and gave you points based on things. And, if you were particularly creative, you could, if you even found a solution that they didn't think of, they'd be like, oh, we didn't think of that. And that's pretty good. So that could be really fun. Anyway.
It's really interesting to think about the lineage here too, because we did play these sort of out of order. And I think as far as like going farther back, as far as the first person dungeon crawler genre, especially the grid based ones, this is probably as far back as we're going to want to go. We looked into wizardry and stuff, and it just kind of gets a little bit silly. But
maybe Ultima 4, that would be the other one I would consider strongly because of its strong ethical play. Although it's a difficult game to complete because it's. I guess if you use a walkthrough, it's probably not too bad. But figuring it out on your own, that's going to take some time. I mean, I love those games, and
we didn't play a traditional Ultima.
Big fan of even the spin-off games, Savage Empire and Martian Dreams, but they are they're sort of like the hardcore Infocom games where it's just like you got to sit down and plan to spend a lot of time to kind of figure things out because they often have factors that work against you, time factors, or this can only be done, in the full moon, and you got to come back on the full moon, which is, 30 days of game time. And
losing is fun.
Yeah, losing is fun.
That's what the dwarves say.
That's what I hear the dwarves say.
But I'm even talking about the exclusive first-person dungeon crawlers, like this one. And the reason I bring it up is like, until I started this one, I just forgot. And not having played Dungeon Master, I assume its context is all within one dungeon too. Ultima, Underworld, this concept of going below a city into the sewers and just having these, just meeting multiple factions, which we will in this game, and this sort of like this descent into the depths of something, but just being in a consistent single multi-level dungeon, it just became such a trope it still is, and I don't know why I love it so much. I just love this concept of, when the cave-in happened at the beginning of this, I'm like, yes, let's do this. We're
stuck down here.
We're gonna.
The only way out is through.
Yeah. It's just I just love it so much. And then as soon as I put pen to paper or digital pen to digital paper, I just felt so good. Just like I'm doing this for real. Like I'm doing this. I don't know what it is. There's a sweet spot because obviously I'm not doing everything because they automate certain things for you within the game, but I don't know, for some reason mapping.
What do they automate? No,
not map wise. I just mean they're doing the rules, automation. They're doing AI, there's those sorts of things.
Stuff where you're not actually rolling the dice.
You're not doing all the bookkeeping, but the maps, they didn't get there. They haven't gotten there yet, and that is of course why Ultima Underworld's map was such a revelation at the time because of the the fog of war. Built it as and you could annotate it, which was like crazy. It's like huge deal.
I love that stuff. That's something I would love to see more of. It's not something we see much of. And I actually, honestly, I guess you guys do it. You actually do it a little bit in the D&D campaign. You'll just write stuff right onto the map with your own tools. Say, remember there's a lava here or whatever.
We should do it more, but the problem is in that context for Roll20, we can't ourselves go back to the maps by ourselves.
Right, exactly.
Right? We don't have a history that we can go to. It's only when you put us there. So that's one downside to that.
For sure.
Yeah. But then I guess as a segue to another topic we want to talk about with the first person aspect, and it happens really from frame one potentially is this concept that you can interact with the play space, which was for me at the time was also another revelation. I don't know how much Dungeon Master did this.
It also did it. Yeah.
Did it? Yeah. So the precedent maybe was set there, but this being the first time that I had experienced it, picking up a rock and putting it in your inventory, breaks that fourth wall, right? And just like it's a further extension of what I wanted, right? As a young gamer at the time. Where it's like, okay, yeah, I see that rock. I don't have to like finagle some sort of menu to get it. I just do it,
Right. An Ultimate game would have had a special key for pick rock, right? I mean,
right.
They famously used every key on the keyboard. It's like you couldn't just have one key for lock and unlock. No, you have to have U for unlock and L for lock. And this game just kind of makes everything accessible in that way. You want to pick something up, you just reach out and grab it, and drag it somewhere. And of course, part of that is the invention of the mouse, which wasn't there for Apple IIs. But you also have the thinking about it, the sort of abstraction of, like we talked about with something like Ocarina of Time, where it's like you just do things contextually. Like, why would you hit any other button here? So just make it the one button. Which is sort of the levels of abstraction that come later, and in game design. Part of that is certainly system resources and the sort of authoring and additional information you might need, you may not have space for. There are other reasons for it. But once you have more space, you start thinking, wouldn't it be nice, a little quality of life thing if we could, instead of having a special key to pick up the rock, we just went in and clicked on it and moved it. Wouldn't that be nice? I will say it's not terribly systemic with that stuff. I was a little surprised. I did play with this a little bit. The rock will depress the pressure plate, but a dagger will not.
Are you sure about that?
It was true of the important one. So there was the first floor had a sort of puzzle.
Was there a wall? Was there a wall close enough to the? I only say that because you will use it again.
The rock?
No, the dagger.
Oh, I've got like 7 daggers.
No, I'm saying you will need to test that theory again.
That may be true. But on the first floor anyway, I was like, oh, cool. Well, I don't have that rock anymore. Let me just put down a dagger because I've got like 6 of them because I've been killing kobolds.
Oh, you didn't throw the dagger. You just set it on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah, I just placed it where the pressure plate was.
Yeah.
Just the way the rock would be placed.
Yeah.
And it didn't work.
That's interesting. That's weird. Yeah, because I think it does later. There's
true.
Actually a place. Well, I don't know. Can you No, you can't equip rocks. Can you equip rocks? I don't think so.
I didn't try.
Yeah, because you can throw daggers, and I could rocks.
Presumably, get up to the door and like throw the dagger and step back through the door or something.
Oh, you wait. Yeah.
Oh boy.
They get crafty. I mean, we'll talk about it later. I don't want to ruin it, but that. We'll in the future sessions
have to hit a switch on a wall by throwing a dagger.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll just get into how they're stretching what they have, what their capabilities are, and getting clever, right? Which constraints.
I mean, I seem to remember doing that sort of thing with a bow and arrow in this game in my prior playthrough, which was not that long ago. Well, I played play-ish, played 2 or 3 levels of it, and I was having a blast, and then just something else I needed to deal with, jobs and things.
Yeah. I think you make a good point on the mouse. I also want to mention audio. I'm just browsing over some of the stats. Ad-lib. Their audio cards were becoming more of a thing.
Yeah, and there were many
audio chips, and I just again want to call out that I forgot how cool the audio is and the music as well in this. And so I guess I'm seeing here there's like 150 different ad-lib sound effects in the game, which I think is super cool. The game that came to mind to your point about like pressing, different keys and different and just the sort of the feel of it. I had a bit of a rogue flashback as well, even though that's procedurally generated. The sense of going through room by room, right? Like this is your first person dream of a rogue, of rogue, where you're going through and you're finding a potion on the ground, or, I mean, it's what it is. It's like, it's just a first person version of that. And you could even throw stuff in that game, right? In Rogue.
You could, yeah.
And it would have a bit of persistence. And I guess it had true persistence.
It had persistence, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not if you left the level, but while you were on the level.
Oh, okay.
The levels were not the same when you came back.
Well, and then to the point of, depending on how, not necessarily systemic, but the persistence, the object permanence in the second level that you'll get to, there's times when I'll just say putting a rock on the ground will be beneficial to you from a landmarking perspective. You know what I mean?
Of course, yeah.
And so the concept that you can you don't have to do that, but that's an option.
Yeah.
These little tidbits are just so revelatory. It's just so magical.
Yeah, when you walk into a space and they teleport you and you're like, "What? Where am I?" Yeah.
Yeah, dirty. Yeah, it's and then I guess they used deluxe paint to do the graphics for this game, which I'm refreshing my memory on. Deluxe paint. That's a blast from the past too.
The only thing that you did that I didn't do was character creation. I mean, I started to, because I was like, well, I don't have a prior save. Although of course I did because of cloud saves and GOG, because I did play this before. So that was funny. Because I started load a save and I was like, wait a minute, this is not what I expected. And then, although I also played with the default characters, you did not. You actually created a party.
Yeah.
So, tell me about this party. Did you just go in and just max out everything on every character?
No, I actually just used. Yeah, I was wondering how much. I assumed that they would have some balancing mechanism there, but I guess they don't. So
you can just. I made one character and I was like, oh, I can just make all the numbers maximum.
Yeah.
I could just keep upping the hit points. I mean, I didn't hit a ceiling with the hit points, but I only clicked up to like 32, which felt pretty high. It's a third level. It was a third level character. I think you start as third level. So.
Oh yeah. That's a good point that they bump you up there, which is always so funny that the level.
I mean, you're here to save Waterdeep and
rescue
it from a beholder. So starting at first level,
not just any beholder, but
Xanathar.
So no, I just, to keep myself honest, I just used the reroll until I found a set that I liked. So that's how I got the stats, and I wanted the primary stats to be as high as I could. So not sort of cheating, but not also did in a little bit of a legitimate way. But I didn't actually physically modify anything. I just named the characters after various characters from my past D&D campaigns and things. So of course,
Is there a Frosty?
There's a Frosty, yeah.
Is there a Samia?
No. Well, my characters that I played.
Only your characters.
Only my characters, yeah. Different eras. One of the characters goes all the way back to Temple of Elemental Evil when I played that originally around this time. So, I went full...
It's funny, I don't remember any of the names of my characters from back then at all.
Oh my God. I've been using them ever since. Of course I remember them. I still use them today. Yeah. But I probably shouldn't. So I mean, the character generation is pretty simple. They do multi-classing. One
of the default characters is a mage cleric or wizard cleric or something. So.
Yeah. So, and that was kind of a second edition nonsense. I think we talked about with Baldur's Gate, I think, is where you went into the weeds on that. But multi-classing is just ridiculous. So I actually intentionally did not pick any multi-class. But, it's pretty basic stuff getting in there. The spells are crunchy. They have kind of the main things you'd think. Like you said, you have to memorize them and then sleep so you can get them. It's amazing that it's semi-real time, but also maddening to some degree too, because doing all that stuff on the fly is not, I think there are hotkeys for pretty much anything. So if you learn those, I'm sure you can be faster at it, but I'm generally using the mouse only right now. So
I've been using the mouse only because I'm playing on a laptop that does not have a number pad. So it's already
me too.
It's like, well, okay, well, I can't navigate that way, so I'm gonna have a mouse in my hand all the time. So at that point, I don't know if I want to bother. I have a wireless. I have like a Bluetooth mouse, that I use with that laptop, and it doesn't work with this game.
Oh no!
I don't know why. So I had a wired mouse, like it's
like a weird driver thing
or something. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I plugged in the mouse just in case. Maybe it was battery was dying and it was just flaky or something. I also had a weird thing with the network adapter on that machine. So maybe the thing was just a little flaky today, and maybe it'll be fine when I try tomorrow or over the weekend. But yeah, anyway. Shall we move on, sir, to some emails and stuff and get a little bit caught up, because we've got a couple weeks, unless you have anything you want to touch on before we move on.
No, I think we'll have plenty of time to talk. I mean, the basics of this, the basic of this game, I think we'll end up talking about the individual sections maybe, but the basics are going to be the basics. So. Okay.
Well, we'll aim to probably get to like level, the fifth floor or something like that. You said 12. So like try to do fifth, 9th, 12th or something like that. I don't know if we even want to stretch it out that long. We'll see how much meat there is over time. Yeah. One of the risks is, that we cover kind of everything it has to offer systemically or mechanically very early on with this sort of game. So we'll see how it goes.
I wonder if things respawn. I don't like you can clear a dungeon.
There are random encounters if you sleep, I believe.
Yeah, but I wonder if you can grind that way.
Oh, yeah, good question. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if not, then it's a finite amount of XP.
Right.
So interesting. Okay.
Well, at a certain point, they just won't level you anymore as well. I'm sure there's a cap. So you might be able to grind and get to the cap early, but because at a certain point they don't have spells to give you.
We'll talk about lore and Forgotten Realms next time. Maybe
when I send you your 3DS, I'll send you my box set of the Forgotten Realms.
Oh,
and my 3rd edition Forgotten Realms source book. Got both of those still. All right, here we go. Oh, I have a couple of notes before we turn to email. First of them, and this was through an email, but I'm going to read it separately, is that one of our community members, we have all the time folks write in and say, hey, I've started my hand at making a game. And we had one this week or this past month where Jarko Civula is releasing his first game, I believe, next week.
Whoa!
Or on break through Steam and everything. It's called Single Malt Apocalypse, a decidedly retro early 1990s game. He says he tried to combine Sierra and LucasArts adventure games with RPG elements. The story is inspired by old Weird Tales and Amazing Stories magazines and Tintin comics. This is at least how I see it. If you've had time, he's asking if you've had time to test it, you can tell the audience what it's really like. I have not yet. I have installed it. So I will hopefully get to it next week when I'm on vacation. He says the price will be $2.99 and it's a quite compact game. I didn't want this small, humble thing to overstay its welcome. Quite satisfied with the storytelling, and the ending changes a bit according to players' choices during the gameplay. Hopefully this thing will find its niche audience. This game now exists because of this podcast and the supportive community. So thank you, Jarko, and good luck.
Wow.
Yep, Single Malt Apocalypse, the first Dev Game Club inspired release. I believe. I know we've had somebody else who's mailed and sent a link, but I think it was just a Dropbox link, and I have not had time for that either this summer. But I also have it, so I'm going to try to. It might have been on, what's that platform called? Well, anyway, the other one was Pippin Barr, who we mentioned recently in connection with his podcast with David Walensky called Game Thing. He has a new book coming out in the next, I think, couple of weeks. Roughly that's in August anyway, from MIT Press. It's called The Stuff Games Are Made Of. It's kind of a slim volume, about 150-ish pages. I got an early release PDF that I have read a little bit of, but I intend to crack into deeper over break. It does look like fun, and it might be the sort of thing that's up folks' alley. It is kind of an overview. It talks about a lot of different things, mechanics and rules and code and graphics and UI. I mean, lots of sort of different pieces of games, from his own unique perspective. So, I like Pippin's work. So I'm very curious about it. So happy to have gotten a copy sent to the Gmail address for us, which is segue devgameclub@gmail.com, where you, sir, have the first email.
The email is segue at
segue at devgameclub@gmail.com.
All right, sorry, I had to. Okay, first email, Metroid.
It's usually me, so it's fair game.
I had to get one every so often. Metroid boss styles from Walker. I won't make a.
You already have. You just did. Mm-hmm.
I did. Hey, Brett and Tim, I'm moving on. I also played Metroid Fusion relatively recently, specifically in advance of the release of Dread. Oh, interesting. In the ensuing time, I've noticed that Dread has gained a reputation as the most difficult Metroid game, and it is certainly challenging, but to me, Fusion was harder, and I think it has to do with the decision in the boss design that I hadn't seen described specifically by anybody. So in Fusion, as in Super Metroid, and pretty much all the rest of the series that I can remember, the bosses have patterns that you learn, but they have mostly to do with figuring out where the vulnerability windows are and taking advantage of them to unload as much as possible, while minimizing the damage you take in the times between those windows openings. In the later game boss fights, it is not realistic or expected that you would go through them without taking damage at all, and it plays more like a tug of war with your number of missiles and energy tanks determining the overall difficulty to some degree. Yeah, I would agree with that. As a result, I found almost all the bosses frustrating to fight right up until the moment I barely scraped out a win, and by late game, I usually greeted each new boss with a sigh of exhaustion right off the bat. Yeah, totally. Especially like the Nightmare.
That Nightmare one and that
Ridley,
one in the plant area. Oh.
The plant one was just terrible boss
Ridley
design.
was probably of those, handful was probably the easiest for me, but then the boss, the Samus X or whatever, the X Parasite Samus was.
I still haven't finished that one.
Yeah, I that was where I was like, I've got enough. I've done enough here.
Yeah, I didn't beat that one. I want to go back. Like I said, even in Metroid 1, I'm at Mother Brain, and I'm like, this is, even with rewind and save states, it's impossible. Anyway, so I'm with you, Walker. So he goes on, in Dread, by contrast, the boss patterns behave in, for lack of a better phrase, a more binary way? ? Most of the bosses can take Samus down in a very small number of hits, regardless of energy tank levels. Learning the bosses is not... Oh, that reminds me of... Learning the bosses is not only about finding when the vulnerability windows open, but also about learning how to effectively dodge and or counter every single attack the boss has.
Explosion.
Yeah, this is really familiar. You are expected and required to be able to eventually get to a point where you can fight the boss without taking basically any hits at all. And unlike in Fusion and other classic Metroid games, this is actually possible. The result for me was that boss fights in Dread began with a feeling of, oh God, how will I ever... This is like... this mail might as well be called Dark Souls. Oh God, how will I ever beat this? And then through repetition and learning, by the time I was capable of beating the boss, I was completely mopping the floor with it. Sometimes not taking a single hit through the entire battle. For this reason, finally beating each boss felt immensely satisfying in a way that they never really did in older Metroid games. In my opinion, they still stacked the late game with too many bosses in a row, but I finished the game with a giant grin on my face and am eagerly awaiting the follow-up. Hopefully, it'll be less than 15 years this time. A word of warning when it comes to the virtuosic virtuosic controller dance of holding some buttons in place while tapping others and using the sticks. Metroid Dread really takes the cake. I highly recommend docked play with a pro controller. Wah, wah. I don't want to play that way. But somebody had written in. Oh, I think actually that mail's coming up, huh?
Yep, probably.
Okay, well, I will relay an image that one Dave Walensky, who you just mentioned, sent me of these Joy-Con aftermarkets that he got that looked to me like a GameCube, basically broken up GameCube that's stuck on the side of a Wii or a Switch that look much better. So anyway, I'll have to find out which one he got. So keep up the great cast, Walker. Yeah, I didn't mean Walker to I don't know if you're a Dark Souls player, but it's interesting because
I'm sure the influence is there, right? I mean,
that's what I was just going to say. Is that it's like the cyclical influences that we talk about on the podcast. It's like Metroid influenced Dark Souls, and now Dark Souls has come back around and influenced Metroid, but not by Nintendo. So it's so interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, early Zelda games inspired things like early Elder Scrolls games.
Mm-hmm.
Skyrim inspired Breath of the Wild. It's the cycles are there. Between East and West, or even just in Japan. So that's definitely a thing. We're all building on the shoulders of giants, as we were talking about a lot in this episode. Some of the things that we see in this game that we were talking about, Eye of the Beholder, actually go back a ways, to Dungeon Keeper, which actually had a much bigger main sort of area. And then even like we said, to some
Dungeon Master,
Dungeon Master, and some of the earlier games, that had first person perspectives in some places, right? It was just kind of a thing. And then of course those inspired later games, and became, kind of what we take for granted these days with a lot more physics. Anyway, I have one here from Mr. Pockets. Subject is Metroid Wild, Hypotheticals, and Green Lights. I'm listening to the Metroid Prime series and loving it. In one of the episodes, Tim, as is his custom, goes on a bit of a tangent, wondering about the upcoming Metroid Prime 4 game and what it would look like if Nintendo did a Breath of the Wild on the Prime series. This was after discussing how the first Prime game was such an interesting departure from the original 2D Metroid template. Although I would love to hear you guys speculate on what Metroid Breath of the Wild might look like, don't let me stop you, I have a different question. How do games get the green light to be made? I've been in the software industry for some time and seen a few different approaches, but I have never been around creative projects like games, so I imagine it might be very different to what I know. If I do a bit of mental thinking, I guess your answer would be, it depends, so let me be more specific with my question. Tim, imagine you had your own game company. Let's call it, I don't know, Triple Star Conglomerate. Just for the sake of the discussion, TSC for short. Let's go crazy and say a bunch of your good friends were working with you there. Now picture yourself running TSC. Hypothetically speaking, TSC were to have a process for discovery, ideation, and greenlighting games. What would that process be? I understand any answer works. Any answer would be purely speculation. Feel free to spend the next 3 episodes answering this. And that is the end of the email from Pockets. Johnny Pockets.
Oh, Pockets.
Yep. TSC. Oh, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Triple Star Conglomerate. Interesting name.
Pockets always pushing hard on.
Yeah, we had it in the Discord too, And isn't there a meme with "That's Bait"? With what's his name from Mad Max? Tom Hardy. That's bait.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can talk about green lights. I mean, it's been a long time since I've worked at a place that had that kind of green light like you're talking about. I mean, LucasArts was the last place that I worked which had a kind of green light like that. And there it was mostly the project leaders who did it, and they pitched to other project leaders. It was not maybe the best for, money making, It was more like creative, pushing creatively, and it was the sort of thing where some project leaders could come in and say, yeah, and then so you're going to be a motorcycle, you're going to be in a motorcycle gang, you're the leader, but your bike's going to get all screwed up, you're going to have to get it repaired, and then there's these hover cars, and they'd be like, yeah, okay, Tim, just go make your game, whatever. And others had to kind of fight for their concept. That was changing by the time we left, but that had definitely been the way LucasArts worked. I don't know to what degree you've seen that, sir. Or to what degree you want to talk about it, or how such a process might look at some fictional company called TSC.
What on Greenlight specifically, though? I missed it. What's his specific question on Greenlights?
He said, how do games get the green light to be made?
Oh, and he's asking about it, our company.
Well, then he goes, he's like, let me make it super specific, So
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, and he was joking about the depends, answer. I think, my experiences were very specific to the companies, right? To your point on LucasArts, it's like we had both started around the time that LucasArts was going through quite a transition, because it was largely doing original IP focused stuff. Right. For a long time, until
there were some little films being made.
Yeah. Strategically, things change, and so like getting a green light changed at that point. And I wasn't obviously I was only involved with the minimally there toward the end as far as this process goes. But I think Brett's right in that the culture of that company was super weird, because it was quite an old developer and private company and had deep pockets. And so they were more willing to, I would say they were more willing to take bets on things that didn't sound lucrative because of creativity or trust or internal politics, or or that the person, like you mentioned with Tim, just had a pedigree and a track record where you're like, well, it's probably going to be fine.
They're going to go into time traveling porta potties? What? I guess.
Yeah, or like Grimm, right? Is another example of just came out of complete nowhere, like no one, and there's like, yeah, that's, and then ended up kind of trailblazing as far as adventure games go. So, you take those chances, but my era, whenever I was involved with that, it was so IP driven at that point, but we could, as an example, you talk about something like Republic Commando, where we were coming off of 2 flight action games and not wanting to work on another one of those, even if they wanted us to, and so trying to find green lighting at that time, I believe, and I think this is my experience in other places as well, has a lot to do with trying to figure out that sweet spot of trends too, of like, what do you think, where's the market? Yeah. What is something that can stand out in the market, but also follow on some trends to have a higher probability of being greenlit, right? Because they're going to bet something on you. And then the other key thing that we lived through that era, I really believe, is budgets started getting too big.
Oh yeah,
and absolutely. So greenlighting was a much bigger proposition at that time.
Well, and we had a number of titles that got greenlit and canceled, like over the course of Republic Commando, all at once, right?
Yeah,
I had been on Full Throttle 2, which was a game that was greenlit and it had some challenges, to put it mildly. And then, but it then ran up against like, okay, now it will take how much to finish it? Okay, what if we shrunk it down in this way? How long would it take to finish that? And in both cases, the number was too big, too much for what it'll get back. And that was also true, I think, of Freelance Police, the Sam and Max game. I feel like there was another one at the same time. I feel like there were 3 games. Oh, well, and then there was like Bounty Hunter, which had like blown its budget by a lot and was... had some difficulty finishing besides, right? I mean, so there's some games like that at the same time that were costing the company quite a lot. Red Rock, another one, which was maybe the last of the original IPs at that point before it was over.
There were a couple other originals that were canceled.
Yeah.
that I won't mention, but the problem was that, you know, you had IPs in the building that you could leverage, and it was
Yeah.
hard to justify. It was hard for management, executives and management, to justify, well, why not just make this a Star Wars game, you know,
Yeah.
because monetarily, you know, we'll make this much more money, blah 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 blah. So
Right. Which is how you got Star Wars car combat game.
Yeah. Lots
You know?
lots of things.
Lots of things.
Go
like
back
that.
and look at that.
I mean, you look at that era. That was end of PlayStation 1, but yeah, it was yeah. So sometimes things got greenlit because you could put Star Wars on them. Sometimes you got things greenlit because you had a lot of trust in the people making them, but that trust eroded as the budgets got high enough that, you know, the ROI started to matter a lot. There was definitely a point early in LucasArts history. It's like, yeah, whatever. If this stuff makes money, great, it makes money. But, you know, it was cost so little compared to the worth of the IPs and the deep pockets, as you say. You know, it was like a couple dozen people's salaries, which, and especially considering the salaries at the time were quite low, was not exorbitant. So they could probably break even. But yeah, that definitely changed over the time we were there. Yeah, after that, I really haven't seen much of it, so it's hard for me to judge.
Yeah, and I mean, I was after that going intentionally toward IPs, right? Tomb Raider, Halo, and things, and so their greenlight processes are very specifically different. Because in Tomb Raider's case, we did have many greenlight meetings and went through a whole process, but it was very much about like, is this going to be Tomb Raider enough? Is this going to be
right.
You know, reflecting the franchise in the right way? Of course, we were trying to reboot an origin story and all that stuff, and so the scrutiny came from a whole different direction of like,
more of a
should you do
on
this?
The ideas. Yeah, is this what it should be? Yeah,
because this game's happening, but is this the right version of this game to happen? You know, and we went through a lot of, you know, there's a lot of this stuff is public out there, but we went through a lot of iterations of exploring what that game could be before we got to where the team ended up. So yeah, It was quite a journey, and the greenlight process was terrifying, to be honest.
Yeah.
And same with Infinite. Infinite had a similar trials and tribulations when it came to how do you progress forward with this storied franchise.
Yeah.
So
I had a lot of fun with that game, Infinite.
Yeah, the team did a good job.
Main campaign. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm not a big multiplayer player, so, you know, I was like, oh, I played that and that was good. I'm done. You know, but so I understand that particular market, you know, wants something different than I do out of a game, but I really enjoyed what I played of it. So I thought you guys did a great job. All right, let's hit that last one. I think we can do it. It has to do with rhubarb, I believe.
I don't really have an answer for Twin Suns. I mean, I've thought about it, but I won't. Not much to his question about.
Like he can reel me in. Whatever Brett's doing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a whole different, you know, different goals for Twin Suns. So, okay, so email 2. Transformative experiences in games, novels, and rhubarb from Pockets.
Yep, a twofer.
Good day, gentlemen. I would like to share a gaming story, but first let me establish a tenuous link to the current game, Metroid Prime, to give relevance to my email. Metroid Prime was one of the last games I purchased for my beloved GameCube, the original portable console. Funny. Before bequeathing it to my little brother as I moved cities, got my first full-time job, and joined what I thought to be the real world. The actual last game I purchased was Zelda Wind Waker. Tenuous link established. Okay, fine. It wasn't until many years later, when I started listening to a certain podcast, did I think of playing games again seriously. Until then, I had not purchased another console and had been surviving with a Mac, not so many games. I was living vicariously thanks to said podcast, but in 2019, when I had a bunch of international business trips coming up, I decided to get another console. The game I purchased was Zelda Breath of the Wild. Tenuous link maintained. Oh my goodness, I thought. those game developers have been busy over the past 15 years. What a reintroduction to gaming I got. The sense of exploration was amazing. Walking up the next hill just to see what was on the other side. It was beautiful. I didn't know games could do that. For me, playing Breath of the Wild was a transformative experience, and so far as my understanding of what was possible in games. If I look for a personal parallel in literature, I think the novel 1984 by I think of the novel 1984 by George Orwell. When I read it for the first time in university, it totally wiped me out. I was deeply moved, first by the fate of the main character, but also by the deep sense of hopelessness the author was able to communicate. I could feel the decades that separated us melt away, and the message that Orwell had prepared over 50 years ago reach me finally. Finally, but also perfectly. I didn't know books could do that. I didn't know communication could be so profound despite the years of separation. Now to the obvious question. What transformative experiences have you had in games? Was it the introduction of the third dimension? Maybe it was something on the development side on Legos of developing games, or was it being able to beat Dark Souls with nothing but a stick of rhubarb? Keep fighting the good fight. Cheers, Pockets.
Yeah, what was your big transformative moment with games that connected with you? I mean, I think I've talked before about, for me, it was really that period of getting back into games with games like Doom and Diablo while I was in grad school, where I was like, oh man, boy, these have come a long way, because I had been away from them for a while, that it changed my life, right, to some degree. I also played Quake around that time, as I mentioned with our interview last week. So I mean, I think that's the sort of thing for me that changed. I mean, even Myst a couple around that time as well, I think, was another one where I was like, man, these are really different from what I played, because I played a lot of like Apple II RPGs, and some sort of arcadey stuff, like, I don't know, Lode Runner or what was that game, Sabotage, things like that were, fairly simple. Even like some ports like Robotron 2084 and Joust and things like that on the Apple II, and then tons of arcade games, which I played, in our summer beach vacations at the arcades. Going from those to like Doom and Quake and Diablo was like, oh, whoa, this is a whole thing now. To the point of really changing my perspective on what I would do with the rest of my life. So I would say for me that's just kind of the era, those games specifically.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've talked about a lot of these, and it's ironic that we're reading this episode, because I'm thinking back through and I'm looking at my shelf, because I mean, I got rid of a lot of my collection, and I only kept these. Really, I only have a few more in storage, and all the rest in storage are Metal Gear games. But on the shelf also so this game, Eye of the Beholder, I am not exaggerating, was very much this, because I had been searching for the RPG, the D&D RPG, or even a clone of D&D RPG that was as immersive as I wanted it to be, and this was the first one. We played Ultima Underworld. Go back and listen to that series. That one was what I didn't realize I wanted Eye of the Beholder to actually be. You know what I mean? That was like the full expression of, oh my gosh, look at what's going on here. Like it felt like a real underground world. That one was big. Dark Forces we played. As far as like, I didn't really have the id revelation. I think I've talked about this before when we played Doom or what have you. I need the setting, and I need that all to kind of work. I need the MDA of it all to work really all together for me. So aesthetics are really critical. And when Dark Forces came out, that and playing that was my first person shooter that was like, oh wow. But the one I probably talked a little bit about it when we played WoW Classic, but EverQuest still to this day is probably one of the top transformative games for me, in addition to some of these others. That it was very much like, oh, okay, because there were MUDs and there was UO, right, Meridian, and there definitely were other games out there, but those didn't stick with me. I would dabble with them, but for whatever reason, EverQuest was the full expression of what I didn't know I wanted, and I've never, the social aspect, the massively multiplayer persistence of MMOs. That's definitely was like, oh, I couldn't believe that games were doing this at this point. So yeah, EverQuest for sure. And I don't have that box. I should get that one.
Yeah, what are you doing?
I know.
No,
and then I have Adventure for the 2600 on the shelf too, and that one's still, we talked about that, pretty important.
Nice
for me.
That's right. We're finally working on that adventure sequel you've all been looking for.
Yeah, it's all cubes.
It's full circle. All right. Well, that does us for email this week. Thanks so much for those from Pockets and
wow, we caught up,
and Walker. And we appreciate the emails. Yeah, we're caught up, I think, unless something's come in since we started. You can, of course, send your emails to devgameclub@gmail.com or segue at devgameclub@gmail.com.
You're going to get a bounce back on that, so don't.
Yeah, probably. Maybe I'll go register segue at devgameclub@gmail.com. We also love to read your reviews. I checked today. I didn't see any. We love to have them. I do still have that senior review. Dang it, I gotta remember to do that. I really just have to spend the time with that Flight of the Conchords song. It's been that kind of year. I've been busy. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter or on X at devgameclub, where I doubt you can even find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end. What are you talking about? What happened?
It's been rebranded.
No, it hasn't. Has it really?
Yeah, it's got a new logo, which is just an X. It's the stupidest thing.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, we've got all this brand equity. Let's just burn that. It's just. I'm pleased to see that loss of money. Anyway, someday you might find us twitching again. You can find that link in the show notes if you want to look for it. We can also find a Discord invite. We've been growing that Discord just sort of steadily, and appreciate it. It's a good little community there. I try to drop by several times a week, just say hello. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo is by Mark Garcia, who also does our merch store and helps set up and administer that Discord. So thank you, Mark. Have fun mapping out the floors this week, and good night.
Oh, I will. Good night.